Hello everybody, my name is Craig Bennett and I'm the founder and owner of TechViews and Up, and today I'm going to show you how to set up a wireless remote indoor-outdoor IP camera for a home or business. Now, one thing to keep in mind before I get any further is this is meant for a one-on-one setup. And what I mean by this is if you got a security system, then most likely you have control over multiple cameras and you can do multiple things with multiple cameras. You could hook up a IP camera to a security system, which is relatively easy, but this is meant for a one-on-one where you can access the camera through an IP network, and that way you can see something. You can use it for security. Some people use it for, say, newborns or whatnot. A lot of people use it to see stuff out of their house, maybe pets, which is actually a large market. And if you live near the beach or, say, bird baths, a lot of people actually pay to see stuff on other people's cameras. And a lot of time, what they're paying to see is like the ocean, birds go to a bird bath, a bird feeder or something like that. There's plenty of things that you can actually use this stuff for, obviously, again, to make money or not. I'm not going to show you how to make money with this, just how to get it up and running, and how to make money on it is really dependent on you, because that takes some security stuff and that changes over a given time. So, a quick disclaimer before we move on. I am not personally responsible for anything that goes wrong if you mess up or not, and the reason for it is I'm not physically touching your hardware or software, but I'm also not responsible if anything goes right. The reason for this is I'm here to just guide you on a way to get this thing working. If you do run into any problems, I suggest that you just go ahead and ask questions either by email by techreviewsandup.com or send an email below in the comment section, and that way multiple people can answer it. Depending on the question, I might make a video on it, and if you send me an email, then if you're okay with me listing your name to the world, obviously not your email, but your name, then feel free to tell me in the email that's okay. Otherwise, I'm going to say anonymous person or something like that. But for the most part, if I can't answer it, I will send you someone that can. I personally prefer that you watch this video, get comfortable with it, ask your questions, then do it while you're having this video going, and that way you have something to reference. That way you're comfortable while you're doing it. If you jump ahead and do it while you're not comfortable, guess what happens? So, the last thing I want to mention is this video is going to have certain chapters below. That way you can skip around in case, again, if you watch it, get comfortable, then do it. That way, if you run into a certain problem, you can just go to that chapter. And the reason for this also is because this video is probably going to be a little long, because a lot of people have problems with this, and I want to be very detailed. Now, what do you need in order for this to work? First off, you obviously need some type of internet access. You need to have the internet access hooked up to a router. You could hook it up to a standard IM, and that's where my IP camera is going to be set up to. But you need to have a internet access, a wireless router, Wi-Fi connected to the internet, and you need a computer, being Windows, Macintosh, Linux, doesn't matter, and that's just for the initial setup. Then beyond that, you don't need the computer anymore, so you can borrow the computer. And you obviously need the camera itself. You possibly need some extension cords or whatnot depending on your camera and where you want to set it up, so just keep that one in mind too. But you don't generally need since we're dealing with wireless, you don't generally need to deal with cables, Ethernet cables and whatnot after the initial setup. Now, as far as the camera, what should you pick? You need to pick something that's actually worthwhile in name. I don't mean by features, cost, or whatnot. you need to pick something worthwhile and name. The reason for this is if you set up an IP camera right, you can actually use the IP camera for decades, given that it's in a good location and it's not getting teared up. The reason why I am mentioning this is if you set up, again, if your IP camera right, you can go ahead and move the camera around in case if you want to use it for something else. You can keep it connected to, as long as you get your network set up right and it's running for a long time, you can go ahead and just, if you don't have a use for it, put it in the box. Later on you got to bring it out and it will run, or it should run, given that it kept its memory. Now, what happens if you use a bad camera, and one that doesn't have a good name or something? Chances are is the thing could lose memory, because what you're dealing with IP camera is a computer with the ability to take video images, and that's important to note. It can take audio, possibly send out audio with a speaker, but the most important is it's a computer. Then secondly, it is a video camera. So if it's a bad computer, just like a bad computer that you might be dealing with or whatnot, it can lose some memory, and that can be a bad thing. So that means you gotta take it down, set it up again, and bring it back out. And no one wants that, especially for if you get it set up just like you want. Now, this doesn't mean that you gotta spend a lot of money, but you do need to do some research. You also need to do some research and possibly even ask the company itself if the IP camera is okay to be outside and wireless at the same time. Sometimes this is not, but for the most part it tends to be. And they might list some factors that it might not be. Now, before we jump into the IP camera itself, it's very important that you need to note one very crucial thing. Is your IP address coming into your home a static or dynamic IP address? This is very important to note, because if it's a static IP address, then if you were to connect to your camera, your IP camera remotely, then you should be good to go. But and the reason for me to say this is if you're on a dynamic, you really won't know where to connect, so therefore you can't connect to it. Now, one of the main things you need to do is actually check out your equipment, and I got a quick picture of my stuff, and you need to look for the Ethernet connection. From here, you need to actually connect your wireless in your back. It should look something like this. And then you need to connect to a Ethernet cable from a extender or a Wi-Fi router to the Ethernet connection as seen before. Some light should show up. Obviously before, when you plug it in, the light should show up. When you plug in the actual Ethernet connection and it's connected on both ends, then the light should start blinking and whatnot, and that says it's pretty much working. It's either getting or sending some type of signal. And on the back of it, just make sure that it's all connected and everything's powered up and good to go. And if you do run into any problems, check your connections. And one thing to keep in mind is go on the camera itself within the box and whatnot and look for the actual username and password. There should be some type of username and password on there. As seen here, it's the username here is admin, the password is nothing, at least in the original setup. Now, as far as this goes, you should have some type of software that comes with it. If you don't, then go ahead and download some type of thing like P2P. And what this shows is your computer stuff and your actual webcam stuff. Make sure the first three columns on IP same, your gateway and subnets. Now, one thing I forgot to capture in this is how to make a static, and I will do that right now. Now, as far as things goes, this is just a later capture. I forgot to add this into the video, but like I said, you need to make this into a fix or static or whatever, depending on whatever your stuff is. And I suggest using this. This is actually a pretty good software. So PTP ID Finder, just find it online. I got it with my stuff. I'm not going to do some research and try to do that for you. Just go out of your way and try to find it, and you might find something even better. But as far as this goes, you want it to be fixed, and you want to go and make sure, again, these three are the same as your computer, the first three columns. Then as far as the sub and the gateway, you want to make sure that they're exactly the same. So that's very, very important. Now again, with the fix, basically what this does, and as far as this goes, you can put a 1 at the end. I suggest that, but I also suggest just keeping it as it is so you don't run into any real conflicts. The reason why you want to have a fix is, say you want to do some remote stuff with your IP camera, look at remote or do whatever. Chances are is when you set up a port, your router, your Wi-Fi router will actually reboot. When this happens, you have almost a 50% chance that you're going to get a new last two numbers or last three numbers. And this is very important because if these numbers change, the port's completely useless. You got to redo the port system or setup and go from there. It's a complete pain, and a way around that is simply by doing fixed IP. Fortunately, I didn't get this on camera earlier. I did it later on. Now, as far as the actual port itself, this is very important to note, and this is 81. Do not put it as 80. You can put it at 81. You can put it whatever number, just not 81 or not 80. Keep in mind, this is internal IP addresses. This is for your router. Now, one thing I do advise is do the name, and if you do have this software, go ahead and hit apply. And if you did make a password already for somehow, then go ahead and do that, and it should be this button. So as far as things goes, one thing I want to mention before we jump in is this is the camera. If it does not show here, then you're pretty much out of luck, as you see here. Now, the one thing I'm showing right here is if the actual video doesn't show up, don't worry. What I did on my first couple go-arounds is by copying and pasting this, what I just highlighted in, or pressing open, and that does the same, and that takes you directly to an area where you can control it. I personally advise using the ActiveX, and there's an actual plugin for Chrome and Firefox to use ActiveX, but for any other case, you have this. ActiveX gives you the ability to do the infrared, the IR for night vision, and if you don't have night vision, then it's kind of useless. It's pretty much exactly the same. So as far as this goes, you can mess around with this, and this is all within the actual camera itself, these settings and whatnot. And depending on your model, it's depending on how strong these settings are and easy to control. One thing I advise is messing with the contrast and whatnot. And if you do have some IR, like some night vision, then put it in darkroom and try to mess with that and get configured right now while you have it on hand. Now, what we're doing right here, we're checking out the back end. Some of this is going to be blocked out for obvious reasons, but you need to go to this and go to search. Given your camera might be a little bit different on the software end, but you need to search it if you're going to be wireless, and this gives you a list of your Wi-Fi internet accesses. Pick one, put in a password, and once you put in the password, you'll come to this, and whenever it's done, I'll be right back, or at least my past self was right back. And from here, you should be wireless. Now, from this point on, what you could do to test it is unplug your stuff from the Ethernet cables and whatnot, and then test it out, see if it works, and if your thing's showing up, then you're good. And especially if you can log in and whatnot, you're good to go, and you're wireless. Especially if you have a fixed IP. Now, I'm not fixed IP for your entire internet, but your private, your for your camera. Now, as far as things goes, where that video came up, that shows that everything's good to go, and we're going on and we're going to check the wireless, make sure that everything's right. So just do a quick overview, and we're good to go. Now, with this, if you got to change the wireless later on, you might have to plug things in, and like you did just a second ago, and that's important to note. Now, I'm going to actually go ahead and put in the port number 81 into the stuff. Your router, your software and stuff might be slightly different, but for the most part, you need to find a way to do a port forwarding. Now, what I'm doing here right now is, in case if you didn't know your IP address towards your camera, which you should have known by now, you can look at your client list, and it could be some stuff in the software, but for right now we're looking into here. But obviously we know it because, well, we used it. Now simply just go to wherever your port forwarding is and put in whatever description. Should say it's a camera, especially if it's not a security camera, you want to separate them. Enable it, obviously put in your port, and for this case it's 81. I found, if you didn't know if it's TCP or not, then put it on both, but TCP worked, and it was just a quick check. And I looked around, and for this software, I don't think I found if it was TCP or whatnot. I just think I just gave up and checked it. Now, with things, you need to go and find your IP address, your last two numbers, and put it into the private IP address, so it redirects into the camera. So when someone from outside service puts in your public IP address, then for ports 81, it goes directly to your camera and activates it, so you can use your camera remotely. And that's all that does. Now keep in mind, this reset or this reloads. To check it, go to this tool, which I'm going to link, and that way you can check if it works, and you should be good to go. Now this, you put in your public IP address, the port number, and if it says success, like it does here, then you're good. And if you got a static IP, there's nothing more you need to do. But if you got a dynamic, or if you want to use a dynamic DNS, then just set that up, and there you go. And all you have to do is have a computer or something running whenever you want to use your camera. That way the dynamic DNS knows what your current IP is. So one thing I advise you to do is set up your actual stuff right now, put in the passwords for the camera, that way no one can screw with it. And if someone actually somehow got into it and figured it out, your camera, they can actually go in, put in their own password, and you can get in your own stuff. Of course you can reset it, but in some cases it's nearly impossible. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now just go through the settings and whatnot, and I will be right back. Now, how do you know if your dynamic DNS is working or not? Just simply type in here your dynamic DNS and the port, and the port is 81. Obviously the dynamic DNS is blocked out for obvious reasons. But again, I advise you to go ahead and use the ActiveX. Even though I'm in Chrome, there is a plugin for ActiveX, and you still get this dialog down here, but you get all these functions. I can turn on and off the night vision, as seen here, off. I can't see nothing, that's completely useless. On, give it a second or two, and there you go. Now one thing before I forget, one thing you can't do, and unfortunately I found out this, you can't set the night vision stuff next to a screen. this is quite important because the screen, especially the screen I have on my deck, it not only blocks the night vision from going out in the yard, so I can't see anything in the yard, but it also reflects it back, so it's like a solar flare or something in my eyes. And the same thing happens on windows and whatnot. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, obviously, if you know, it's daytime and whatnot, you can turn it off and go from there. But for the most part, let's give it a second or two, and for the most part, you should be alright. Now, one quick thing is, if you do run into any problems in this entire setup and whatnot, feel free to leave me a question down below or in the email, and I'll try to answer you as quickly as possible, or send you to someone or a group that can answer it. But also keep in mind that if you're doing a security setup, you need to use actual security software. Yes, this first part, this entire setup was how to set it up just to get it on the network. But now, since you got on the network, if you want a security setup with multiple cameras and whatnot, well, you can do it on this. This is not reliable worth anything, and you need to actually use some security software on a server or something. And this is quite important because you need something to record the stuff to, and that's very, very, very important. And this could be even a remote server, as long as you got dynamic DNS and a computer on or a server on, you should be fine. Might as well just have it all internal if you gotta have that anyways. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is you need, from here on out, if you want a security setup, use security software, high grade if all possible, if you can afford it. There's some free stuff. I'm going to look into this in a later date, so keep an eye out for that, but that's probably going to be in a year or more, so that's also one thing to keep in mind. But again, if you run into any problems setting this up for a single IP camera, then let me know down below or email me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Or if you got any tips or suggestions on how to do a better job, or a camera that's worthwhile or whatnot, not the spam, something that you have, but you know, just something worthwhile to help people out, go ahead and leave that in the comment section, and if I like it and if I can make a video on it, I might even give you a shout out. Now again, this has been Craig Bennett, founder and owner of Tech Reviews Nope, and please like, please subscribe, and please share. And again, if you have not already set up a dynamic DNS, check out that video. It's very quick. It's on probably 5 minutes or whatnot. I haven't created the video itself, but the process doesn't take that long. It's like a couple seconds. But just check out that video. That way you're set there, and that way you can have remote access no matter what. Even if you're on a static IP, if your internet provider chooses to change your stuff for one reason or another, then still you have the dynamic IP. So anyways, again, please like, please share, and please subscribe, and hope you have a great day, and please check out techreviewsnope.com.